Hajime no Sendo. Sendo is one of my favorite characters in the Ippo series, so myself and a lot of other Ippo fans are super excited that for the first time ever, one of his main rivals is going at it with somebody who Ippo himself could not defeat. In general, Morikawa's cast is something that stands out to me in the manga more than anything else. I love how unique he gives each character and their motivations for boxing. I love the personalities that complement and contrast each other very well. In Sendo's case specifically, I love his desire for the pinnacle of strength and settling for nothing less than that. I love the straightforward, no-nonsense approach to boxing, and every time he's on screen, he exemplifies that alpha energy which you can't help but be inspired by. This is especially prominent in the current fight against Gonzales. The atmosphere is electric. It's an obviously Mexican-biased crowd, but you can still see a lot of people cheering for Sendo. You hear them yelling, Tigre, Tigre, and whatnot, which you'd think is insane given his track record, because what has Sendo been doing in preparation for Alfredo? He's been defeating Mexican rankers. He's been getting used to the Mexican style of boxing. But at the same time, it makes sense because his fighting style embodies something called machismo, which Ricardo and his camp actually mentioned in the latest chapter. It's a word of great importance in Mexico. It's a set of values on masculinity. It's truly living how a man should. So it's really cool to see the crowd supporting both fighters in a match with such high stakes, which of course gives the winner the right to face the champ himself, Ricardo Martinez. I want to say a couple things about the Ippo spar before we dive into the fight. So, as you guys know, Sendo and Ippo were sparring before the Gonzales fight. And Ippo was kind of just moving around, just more so dodging, getting him warmed up, right? Not really going that hard. But Sendo is really trying to rock him. You see Ippo actually close in eventually on Sendo, and he has a clean shot on him, but he pulls it back, which really pisses Sendo off. So Sendo ends up rocking him after that, and of course they end the spar right there. Part of me believes that this spar was Sendo coming to terms with himself that his rival is actually gone, that he is not going to get that round 3, that he is moving on from Ippo Makanouchi. I believe that more than anything, Sendo would want another shot at the man who defeated him twice, and not only defeated him twice, but he's the only man to ever defeat him in an official match. Yanoka and Sendo are discussing the spar, and Sendo points out how Ippo was off his game in the previous spar after Volk's title match, which of course alludes to Ippo's punch-drunken state. Yanoka then comments on how Ippo has evolved his hand speed, step-in, as well as having a cut that wasn't there before. He then goes in on how accumulated damage can mess up your senses, but time off can potentially alleviate this. Ippo hasn't been sparring or taking any hits, but he still kept up a very heavy training regimen in his new role as a trainer, so it makes sense how they noticed his improvement. But the real point of this conversation is to point out how it doesn't matter how much someone physically grows if they don't have a sense of purpose. Coming back with half-hearted feelings and no driving force is just a recipe for failure. Sendo claims that Ippo's gotten weaker, which means he understands that he still hasn't found that spark to get back in the ring. So he moves on and is now 100% locked in on Alfredo Gonzales. A lot of fans, including myself, are hoping that this is the match that's going to fully inspire Ippo's comeback. Maybe it will take watching his friend and rival have such an exhilarating match on a grand stage. Perhaps it'll be something crazier than that. Maybe it'll take Sendo's career being ended at the hands of Ricardo Martinez the same way it happened to Date. We already know Ippo got the baton passed to him once from Date, so what if it takes ending his close friend and rival's career to motivate Ippo to pursue the world title for the Japanese? Personally, I'm hoping for the former solely because I don't want to have to wait a long-ass time to see him in action again. But knowing Morikawa, I could definitely see it being the latter. So Sendo's introduction to this match was supreme gas, man. I felt like I was Michael Buffer reading that shit. Like I alluded to earlier, Sendo's getting a ton of love from the crowd. Not only because of his persona, but also the fact that Mexico is familiar with various Japanese pro wrestlers who also share a tiger persona. Sendo, of course, talks about how being in this hostile road environment just makes him even more excited to get to work. Some characters just thrive off this extra adversity, man. Gotta love the characters who are built with that mama mentality. Sometimes I wish Ippo had more of that in him, but I understand that it's not exactly within his character to do so. Sendo, of course, starts the fight by not touching gloves and instead throwing out the first punch of the match. Alfredo isn't really fazed by this though, and why would he? He's the second-ranked featherweight in the WBA after all. One of the best parts about this fight is the fact that we're actually getting commentary from Ricardo himself. The Mexican national champ Jose Nargo tells Ricardo that Sendo is the one who has the most destructive power in the featherweight division, which is pretty crazy to say in front of the champ himself, but Ricardo nonetheless remains humble about it. Nargo then proceeds to say that this might only be true because Ricardo has never hit him with full force, which would definitely fit his personality. He reminds me a little bit of Dracula Mihawk from One Piece, where he wouldn't go all out hunting a rabbit, that he would only show his true strength when absolutely necessary. Which is kind of ridiculous to think about it, because some people interpreted this as, we've never seen Ricardo go all out. And the more I think about it, the more based on his character and how he's been built up, that may actually be true. Like, holy shit, we've never seen a man go all out who's 68-0. You know, at this point, it doesn't seem possible for anyone to beat this man in his prime. You know, like, we might have to wait for Ricardo to decline due to old age for anyone to even have a shot at this guy. Alfredo starts off this match with very calm and collected lefts that do a really good job of keeping Sendo out of range. Sendo keeps trying to respond but finds himself getting countered. Honestly, I picked Sendo to win this fight before the match started because I think it makes more sense narratively. I don't see how George could give us Gonzales versus Martinez round 3 and have anyone really be invested in that. Plus, it's just a good opportunity for the sake of Sendo and Ippo's rivalry. This is a really good opportunity to give Sendo a 1-up since Ippo is 2-0 against him. And like I mentioned earlier, could serve as some great inspiration in a potential Sendo versus Ricardo match. So heading back to the fight, there's a pretty clear gap between these two as far as overall ability goes. So it's going to take some evolution on Sendo's part if he wants to stand a chance, which I'll elaborate on very soon. Sendo hates the fact that he's fighting like a calculated honor student and would rather just slug it out in a deathmatch with him. As someone who usually defies common sense and logic, he keeps going for those home run punches and even has the guts to step into one of Alf's counters like that. Sendo relentlessly continues his barrage and is eventually able to gain some momentum and push him into the corner. Ricardo then talks about how Sendo is sending a message with his fist, that he's neither provoking him nor threatening him, but it's an invitation. It's an invitation to enjoy themselves in an all-out brawl. Sendo is sick of his textbook boxing and is trying to bring out the beast inside of him, which of course means his dangerous Metzli mode. One of the most interesting aspects of this fight is the difference in interpretation between Ricardo and Alfredo's coach about the direction the fight is heading. Ricardo thinks it was a mistake for Alf to not use his full power from the start, and that trying to teach manners to a wild animal like Sendo is only going to be counterproductive, that dragging this fight out even more only favors Sendo. We know Japanese fighters are highlighted by their toughness and strong will, especially in Sendo's case with his animalistic sixth sense and crazy ability to adapt. Alfredo's coach, on the other hand, thinks that Sendo is the one who's made a mistake because of how Alf has had such a violent upbringing where he developed an incredibly brutish fighting style on the streets. Alfredo naturally fights like this. In fact, his coach has actually had to suppress this violent nature since it was a terrible matchup for the cool and calm Ricardo Martinez, who gave him his only 2 L's of his career. His coach then elaborates on how Alfredo's fight with Ippo was finally when they were able to achieve the perfect fusion of bloodthirsty savagery and world-class techniques. You see Alfredo finally changing to Metzli mode, and he's easily overpowering Sendo, but then Sendo unpredictably lands a crazy uppercut that sends him flying. This is exactly the type of thing Sendo needs to do if he's going to stand a chance in this fight. He's got to make use of his unpredictability, and regardless of how much of a beating he takes, he's got to take advantage of his crazy endurance and the fact that he'll always stand a chance if he can land one crazy destructive blow. By the third round, it's almost ridiculous how bad Gonzales is beating his ass, and how massive the gap appears to be between them. Yanaka seems to have expected this coming in though, because their plan was actually hoping Sendo would be able to adapt during this fight and get stronger during the fight, since this is the first time he's actually entering the ring, fighting someone who's so much better than himself. Whether it's basketball, football, boxing, or any sport really, sometimes no amount of preparation or training is going to get you over the hump. Experiencing that big moment on the biggest stage in the brightest lights and figuring out whether you're built for this shit is sometimes all you have. Sendo needs to have that Luffy vs Katakuri or Shin vs Rinko moment of evolution if he truly wants to win this. A little before this, you actually see Ricardo start to warm up. Even the champ himself is getting pumped watching this fight. Maybe this even implies that Ricardo thinks it's coming to an end soon. It would make sense based on the way he's been slightly favoring Sendo in these discussions about the fight. And of course, how Sendo piqued his interest back in 1274 when Ricardo sparred him himself. He seemed to think Sendo had this weird, mysterious aura around him, that a miracle would occur for some reason. And in a sense, a miracle did occur because Sendo actually made Ricardo go down during the spar. Now, whether that was legit or not is kind of open to interpretation. It seems pretty clear, based on the panels, that Ricardo just slipped, running into Sendo. But it's interesting how adamant Ricardo is about how that's not the case, how the Tiger was the first person to bring Ricardo down in a spar. I don't know if he's using this to motivate Alf or for any other reason, but regardless, you gotta admit, Ricardo has a big interest in Sendo, and the idea of fighting him in a world title match probably intrigues him more than any matchup in a long time for him. So we see Sendo finally able to land a massive hit in the right solar plexus before the round ends. I could definitely see Morikawa going the route of maybe giving a couple pages of Alf's corner talking about how that shot affected him, or maybe even nerfing him to some extent. We also saw Ippo claim how he was jealous that these two were both giving it their best in the ring, so I beg of you, George, please get this man back in the ring. It's been way too long. And as of right now, I definitely don't see this fight going more than another round or two. So if we're able to see Sendo make this jump, hopefully it will be in the next couple chapters. So I actually just finished recording this right when 1302 drops, so I'm gonna go ahead and give my thoughts on it right now. The chapter starts off with Alf's girlfriend Lisa, who appears very worried about the fight. She understands how dangerous Sendo is, and how similar he is to Alf. We learn she never watches his fights, which is somewhat reoccurring for loved ones in the series, just like how Ippo's mom never watched his fights. Lisa talks with some of the kids who Alf inspired and saved off the streets. It's a very similar dynamic to Ricardo and Alf, whose lifelong goal is to pay back and defeat his idol. But Lisa seems to think enough is enough, that his true feelings have been reached already and that there's no need to pay him back anything more. Both fighters seem pretty gassed in their corners. I definitely expected this from Sendo, but not as much from Alf based on how this fight's been going. It appears that solar plexus shot is definitely affecting Alf, and like I said earlier, Sendo's taking advantage of that unpredictability, as that shot seems to be indicative of him growing stronger in this fight and adapting with that animalistic instinct. Alf acknowledges the similarities between himself and Sendo, and seems to be having a great time fighting him. He's someone who brings out his true form. He was having so much fun that he actually forgets about Ricardo for a second, which is pretty crazy to think. That's not something that I expected for sure, and it makes me wonder what direction George is going to go with his character arc. If he loses, he's never getting another shot at Ricardo, so maybe his dream will have to live on through Sendo, someone who's cut from the same cloth as him, someone from the streets who embodies his true fighting style. Regardless of what George decides to do, I know it's going to be gas. The fourth round begins and it's an all-out slugfest. Alf no longer has that safe zone he was hiding out in. He's fully succumbed to Sendo's invitation to brawl, just like the streets have been asking for. The fight ends with Alf landing a monster left, and man, what a fight, what a fight. This is exactly what we've been waiting for, and I think it's definitely now or never for Sendo. I think he's going to have to pull off a miracle in the next round. That's going to be all for me today. I really appreciate you guys checking this out. Like and subscribe for a lot more content coming soon. Have a good day.